So we found another video called Everyone Hates Diablo 4, and I'm curious to see, now that the beta's over, really what everybody's reaction was to Diablo 4 and to the Diablo 4 beta, and see where everybody's criticism lies. I want to see if people are projecting or if they're actually sort of bringing about valid criticisms of the game based on what has been played, and they're not over-speculating or overreaching. So, having said that, let's go ahead and jump on in it and see what everybody has to say.
For pre-order beta taking place last weekend, we've started to see a slew of early impressions and reviews, many of which coming from seasoned members of the ARPG community who had some major criticisms for the game. And what seemed to be the largest, most common complaints boiled down to a repetitive dungeon structure, poor itemization, the game's use of level and power scaling, and just an overall lack of innovation and or complexity in Diablo 4.
So, before we get really too far into this, they're saying it's not like a full straw man argument, and I'm sure that they could probably cite sources on exactly who said what. But a lot of these sort of criticisms are levied against the game after the beta came out, while we're only exploring the beta and not the full game systems or the gambit of how all of these systems will be modified, including the dungeons and the tree, whatever it's called. There's several other systems, including PvP, that we've not even got a chance to touch. So I think people need to keep that in mind when they say that the systems are sort of repetitive. And they need to remember that they're comparing a new game that's in beta. Some of these people are comparing to PoE, which is a 10-year-old game as well. So that needs to be kept in mind.
Now, I've watched and read tons of this coverage over the past week with videos from some really great creators, like people whose opinion I highly respect and value. Kriparian put out an hour-long epic of a review. This dude is just great. He was a Diablo 3 extraordinaire, holding the world's first and only pre-nerf hardcore Diablo.
You looked and you spent $8.99 for yours. That is a fair bit different than the cost of a Ridge for, you know, almost 5 times that or whatever it was.
Blow Inferno Clear, which was quite a spectacle back then and is still impressive to this day. Plus, he's just a chill dude, like really nice from my interactions. A pleasure to speak with. Ziggy D, who I remember first meeting back in the StarCraft 2 days, later transitioned into more variety and being like a full-on ARPG guide.
So I'm waiting to see. I think he's just kind of like explaining who all they talk to and what their credentials are. And, you know, who levied criticism. So, I mean, it's nice to know because it does maybe lend a little bit of validation towards the criticisms that are upcoming.
Tons of Path of Exile in particular, making guides and such. He put out a really nice, concise critique of Diablo 4. Mr. Llama SC, who is a big figure in the Diablo 2 scene, well known for speedrunning and just really liking Diablo 2. He like lives and breathes this game. He had plenty to say about D4 on behalf of that community. And then there's Asmongold, a man who has earned every ounce of his nerd cred. When it comes to no life in games, he has put in the time, or as the kids would say, he's a real one. Each of these people are very articulate, informed, and presented some well thought out critiques and arguments for why various aspects of the current build of Diablo 4 are a bit lackluster and in need of improvement, much of which I generally agree with. The procedural dungeon system has resulted in a fairly predictable and repetitive structure. After so many runs, the layout becomes pretty clear. You move through some winding paths and or hallways until you reach a locked door or mechanism, and then you must complete one of a handful of different objectives to unlock said door, either killing enemies or retrieving keys or other objects. You do that, the door opens, you fight the boss. Now, dungeons are meant.
So what, I mean, in just curiosity, I don't understand. Maybe I don't know what people want. No matter what, no matter how many systems are put in place, no matter how many different variations are put in place, after you've done it for the 10th or the 100th or the 1000th time, it's all going to start to feel samey, right? The goal is going to be, hopefully, that with whatever variations are added on, it's at least going to keep it slightly engaging.
To be analogous to Diablo 3's rifts, and to that degree, I do feel like dungeons are more interesting than what rifts were, but that doesn't mean the system is perfect.
And I'll agree. I mean, they are better than what the Rift system is. Am I saying that they're perfect? No. But I'm also saying that I've not seen them in their final form. the criticisms being levied are from the dungeons in Tier 2 world difficulty with no modifiers, with nothing on them. If they stay the exact same way they are, but things just become more tanky, and there are a few modifiers that make you not be able to stand certain places or nerf your damage or make certain enemies do more damage, but the general sort of like feel or run of the dungeon is the exact same, and they're all the exact same as the current, you know, handful that we're in, then I could see where it could become a little bit of a problem and a little bit samey.
I think some improvements can be made. Itemization.
I also think there is plenty of room for improvements, but those will take time, and I'm just hopeful that when the game launches, that it doesn't feel too bad at the initial launch and through the first couple seasons.
Is a bit simple and to some may be uninteresting. As of level 25, legendary item drops might make you stronger but are never particularly exciting to get as of level 25. And
Exactly. As of level 25, the builds were very minimal, right? We didn't have access to a lot of the aspects. The legendaries that we were getting didn't make that much of a change and weren't that impactful at level 25 in the beta. And that's what I think a lot of people need to keep in mind.
Enemy scaling with your level really does diminish the sense of power progression. In many instances, as you level up, you feel like you're getting weaker. Combine that with the shared world where you run into these odd situations where someone half your level might be killing enemies faster than you are because of how the power scaling is done. There's also a slew of other...
So we've talked about the power scaling, and I do want to kind of touch on the power scaling a little bit. The power scaling brings the enemies up to you from the floor that they're allowed to start at. So if you're in a level 5+ zone and you're a level 70, the enemies are going to come up to a level 70, right? But then if a level 5 is in the zone, they will kill them faster than you do as a level 70. Because you're killing tougher monsters or whatever. Now, if you transition to a level 65+ zone and a level 5 comes in, the monsters aren't going to downscale to level 5. They're going to hit the floor of 65. So there is that. So progressing through new zones, you will start to notice less and less, right, of these lower level players in these zones sort of, you know, face rolling while you're struggling, right? That's one sort of aspect to this. So the second aspect is going to be that once you hit 70 and the monsters hit 70, when you gear out and start to push into the end game, I'm assuming that your gap between a level 70 world monster, right, is going to sort of start to grow as your item levels go up. As you start running modified nightmare dungeons and stuff like that, and your eye level starts to grow, I'm assuming that the world mobs will cap out at 70 level world mobs with normal modifiers. And at that point, you will start to feel strong again. And you will start to see a gap between you and the level 5 that you're in side by side in a level 5 zone. The reason I think a lot of this felt bad was because everybody was in a beta, so you were in the same zone with a lot of people, and you were in the starter zone grinding out probably way further level than you would normally be while you're playing through the campaign in that zone. So I think that's something that a lot of people need to keep in mind, and we need to see it in the full game. So this is a criticism that I don't really lend a lot of credence or credibility to, because it's still way too early to tell.
Other complaints that I've seen frequently mentioned, like the world boss had fairly limited mechanics. He just really doesn't do a lot of things. Class balance is all over the place.
All right, so the world boss, I have no idea what they're doing with the world bosses. If they dumbed this world boss down due to it being only in the beta, or if they do have a limited set of skills, maybe they're going to add more skills as you get the world boss's health lower. That's what I noticed. It seemed like as we got the world boss's health lower, each sort of gradual notch in the belt, it started doing more and more things. I don't think it needs to have 100 different attacks. This isn't Elden Ring. Give it a solid set of attacks and make it get progressively harder as the health bar goes down. And hopefully the different ones sort of feel better as we move on. And there was something else they said, but I fucking forgot it.
Seen frequently mentioned, like the world boss had fairly limited mechanics. He just really doesn't do a lot of things. Class balance is all over the place.
Oh, yeah. And the other one, class balance. It was a beta. You are playing through the early levels of the game, and class balance at that stage is completely unimportant. I don't care if you make the classes completely unbalanced at level 1 to level 70, but then over level 70, when they start to gear out and they all develop into their kits, that they all start to balance up some, then I'm happy. I don't care about the first 70 levels. And not everything has to be great. Like, you might enjoy playing a rogue, but a rogue is just not in a good spot this season. It's still going to perform, but it's going to take more work. I don't think everything has to be the exact same. It just all needs to be viable. And you can't tell that from a beta.
As of level 25, the UI's overall look and design, some people have issues with. I also saw complaints about the font coming up.
The UI wasn't that bad, but there were some issues with the skill tree. If we circle back around to it, I'll talk about it. But if not, you can always check out my review of the game where I talk about the issues I had with the skill tree.
In some reviews, you know, I mean, I know font theory is a thing. Like, some fonts are more readable and better than others. But also, I don't give a flying fuck. Generally,
I agree. You have a problem with the font, get the fuck out. I really don't care. Like, it looked fine.
Though, I do think most of these critiques are fair and accurate, and I would agree that these are some of the more glaring issues with Diablo 4. But at the same time,
and so a lot of these criticisms and critiques that we went over, or we just went over, I feel like I kind of articulated the way I feel about them and why I don't think they're such a big deal right now, and why we need to wait to see how things actually shake out, right?
I wonder if much of it matters at all to a majority of players.
It's not. It's not going to. The majority of players are not going to deal with all of this. Your average consumer and your average gamer is not going to worry about these first world problems of streamers and professional gamers and people whose job it is to break down all of this content. Your average gamer is not going to worry about it. They're going to get in and they're going to enjoy the experience overall.
Which I think the answer is no. What I would consider to be the most important
And it sounds like we're in the same boat here.
core elements of the game, D4 does seem to get right. It looks great, it feels great, and I have a fun time while I'm playing. Like, I really enjoyed the preview last fall. Last weekend's beta was a blast, and I can't wait to jump back in and wait in the queue with everyone else in the world this upcoming weekend. Blizzard doesn't appear to be breaking any molds here or treading much new ground, although the inclusion of an open shared world in an ARPG is something I really enjoy.
I don't know that we know they're not breaking any molds. Like, from the way it looks, they're playing it pretty safe. But I do want to see the full game, and I feel like we need to see the full game to determine if they actually did break any molds. My guess here is that they're going to have played it very safe and sort of brought everything close to the cuff, took things that worked from other titles they had and integrated it into Diablo 4 to try to move it forward, and then they're going to sort of lean on what works and get rid of what doesn't over the coming seasons and over the coming years.
As an MMO fan, but it also doesn't feel revolutionary. And the more important thing is the long-term progression, the hook that's going to keep you coming back time and time again. And that we just
I think it's why only the first 25 levels were available. Much more would give too much information. Is that what you think it is, Johnny? I think that I think the goal of this beta was to actually test the systems and make sure everything was working properly, and it wasn't to market test the game. And I think that they did a good job of sort of whetting people's appetite while working through some of the issues that we expect to see during the game launch. If they are able to, as fast as they did in the beta, over the course of the first 2 to 3 days the game launches, sort of squash all the issues and get the queue times down to where they're pretty much non-existent, except maybe outside of peak hours, and then after the first week sort of get it under control, I would consider that a very successful launch.
Just kind of have to wait and see until we can get past Act 1 and level 25. In general, it looks like Blizzard is just kind of taking some of what works best in the genre, giving it a Diablo twist, fine-tuning parts, adding a bit of gameplay polish, and creating a product aimed at the mass market. Or in other words, they're doing exactly what they've done with most of their games for the past 20 years. In the fall of
Right, and that's pretty much what we just said. They're taking what they have, they're mixing it up, they're making something that is going to appeal to a lot of people, and hopefully it works for them, and hopefully it works for us as gamers.
2004, when World of Warcraft was about to launch, I remember being unimaginably hyped, just like out of my mind excited. So I went online looking forward to learning more and talking about WoW, and everyone hated it.
And that is why you don't always listen to keyboard warriors, reviewers, and shit you see online. Definitely get in and check it out yourself. There are a lot of people that just like to shit on things
Everyone hated WoW. At least that's how it seemed online. The World of Warcraft, they said, was just...
Then we proceeded to waste 12 years of our lives before we quit playing it. Exactly. And that was the thing. Like, if you went online, I'm sure at the time everybody was hating on WoW with all the other games out there. But you can't just go off of what everybody else says. You have to get in and try it.
Just a piss poor excuse of an MMO, a game for babies. The world and character design looked like a Sunday morning cartoon. The game was incredibly casual. Character death doesn't result in losing experience or gear. Excuse me?
That is one of the weird things, is that you don't lose either, because I remember older MMOs and stuff where you lost at least one, if not both of those. Or someone got you into it later and you still play. There's nothing wrong with it. I enjoy World of Warcraft.
Hey, what is this? Dungeons were instanced, meaning that rival players and guilds couldn't fight you and contest boss kills?
And that was one thing that I did like in some MMOs, and I could see where it was better for the industry overall that they moved away from it, because it did create sort of a toxic environment where people could literally just let you do all the work and then come in and just kill you and take away all the spoils, and you had nothing to do about it. Or you had to have almost 2 raiding parties, right? A party to raid and a party to keep your ass safe.
It seemed like existing fans of the MMO genre at the time were largely unimpressed. To them, WoW was an easy, dumbed down, casual version of games that already existed.
Yet it's still the biggest MMO in the world.
Was the general consensus of what I was reading online, on the message boards, and even the official WoW forums, everywhere I looked. Now, I read this stuff. I thought parts of it all sounded reasonable, but also I just didn't care. Like, I thought the game looked awesome, as did all my friends, and when it launched, we played it, and pretty much didn't stop playing for about 5 years straight. As we all know by now, World of Warcraft is the game in the MMO genre that came out on top in terms of its popularity and influence.
And there are a lot of reasons for that, including embracing the parts of the game that made it more casual to bring in a larger audience, and leaning into the things that it did well and capitalize on those. And you don't have to revolutionize the genre right up front, but as long as you're doing everything you need to do to bring everybody in and slowly picking at it over time, and you have the finance and the staying power, you're gonna do very well. And I can sort of see where the parallels in this video are being drawn between early World of Warcraft and what I'm assuming is going to be the parallels of World of Warcraft in its genre, and what they're saying Diablo 4 is poised to do with the ARPG genre.
It far exceeded every one of the MMOs that came before it. The MMOs which fans of the genre prior to WoW's launch were all saying online were just much, much, much better games. I am not saying that Diablo 4 is going to be to the ARPG genre what WoW was to MMOs. I don't think that at all.
Okay, well, so he's not saying that, but that was what everything from that point up to him saying, that's not what I'm saying, was saying. And, you know, I don't know that I'd necessarily disagree with what he's not saying in this moment. If Diablo 4 does everything that it's trying to do well and appeals to a larger audience, it might do the same thing for ARPGs that something like WoW did for MMOs. It's still very early to tell, and from just the beta, it is very hard to tell. But judging by Blizzard and the way they do things, I could see where they're trying to set this up to do that.
While I do feel like they have nailed combat, and their implementation of this open world and social elements are really cool, something I personally enjoy. From the early testing I've done, it also doesn't seem like Blizzard is bringing much innovation or new ideas to the table.
Having said that, we just went over how World of Warcraft didn't really do anything that crazy or revolutionary at the time. It actually dumbed a lot of things down and made them more casual. So let's wait and see, right?
But it is still too early to fully judge the game, of course, as we have yet to play the end game, which is going to be one of the major things that determine long-term replayability. And maybe there are systems and features and things that they just haven't even discussed in previews, or that weren't even in the end game test that they ran. I don't expect that to be the case, but it is still possible that there is some big reveal still yet to come for Diablo 4 that we will not see until the game officially releases.
And a lot of people have to keep in mind that Diablo 4 is coming out. As long as it comes out with most of the stuff that I have seen and read on the game, it's going to be a very successful launch, and it'll be a very successful probably first year. The goal is, what do they do with the year 2, 3, and 4 to continue to push the game, revolutionize it, and carve out a better niche to go up against games that have been in the genre for 10 plus years. That's what we need to see.
The point in comparing it to World of Warcraft and the discussion around the game prior to release is that there is a pretty clear distinction in my eyes to the hardcore fans of an existing genre, and then maybe what Blizzard is looking to appeal to and make a game for in that wider audience. Yes, they want to pull in fans of ARPGs for Diablo 4, just like they wanted to pull in fans of MMOs for WoW, but they're also looking to then streamline and simplify it in a way that they can push out to many, many, many more players.
Right. Their goal is to make a game that appeals to ARPG fans, but also could appeal to a larger audience, because they know that they're not going to get every ARPG fan out there to come play Diablo 4. There is a such thing as like market share and wallet size and all of that in marketing and in business. And you're not just going to take all of your competition's business. Your goal is to be able to reach further than your competition can. And that is, in my mind, what they're trying to do with Diablo 4. They want to reach further than what everything else currently is to try to bring people on board.
And I do feel like, once again, they have polished an existing structure and concept fairly well. And for a majority of people who may end up playing D4, they're likely to enjoy the game and have a pretty good time. Now, I want to be clear here that none of this is like a dismissal or hand-waving of the critiques. On the contrary, I agree with pretty much every major complaint about Diablo 4 that these creators and other hardcore ARPG fans have been voicing. I do think the dungeon structure gets quite repetitive. I do feel like itemization should be improved so that drops feel more exciting, and hopefully this happens with the later higher rarity items that we simply haven't even seen yet. And then how they're doing the level scaling currently feels off. Like, yes, you do seem to...
So for the level scaling, I've talked about it and how I feel. He's not saying it, but he's saying it. The critiques before release aren't always going to age well. That's very true, Johnny. Well, come on in, Unicorn. What were we just going over? The critiques, right? The dungeons feeling samey or whatever. That's going to happen. There's only so much they can do to make the dungeons not feel samey. The sort of... And I would like to see them better. Like, I feel like there's a criticism on the dungeons. Feeling very samey, but without them being procedurally generated, they're always going to feel samey. Even if you make them procedurally generated, they're still going to feel samey. They're just dungeons. The goal is hopefully that there's going to be enough stuff that you can do that's not just only running dungeons. But no matter what you do to the dungeons, they're always going to feel samey. I don't care what you do or what you change or how you change them, eventually they're going to feel samey. The level scaling, talked about that. I've talked about that till I'm blue in the face. I'm not going to go over it. Watch earlier in the video. And the itemization, I would like to see better itemization. The game is going to be launching with something similar to what we've seen. We haven't seen all of the different affixes or aspects. We haven't seen all the different aspects. We haven't seen all the different legendary aspects. We haven't seen how they interact. So it's a little bit too early to say if they're going to be good or bad. Hopefully, over time, the game sort of evolves the gear and the equipment to feel a little better, but we have to get into the end game and we have to see what in-game gear feels like. So while it's a valid criticism, I feel like it's still too early to tell, especially when a lot of people are looking at these criticisms and comparing them to games that are already out, whether they've been out for 1 or 2 or 10 years. I'm not dismissing the criticism, but I am saying let's get all of the gear before we say it's all bad. Do you know what I mean? Welcome on in, Unicorn. How you doing? How's Peach? How are you guys doing? You guys having a good day?
Get weaker as you level up until you start to get better gear drops. And I'll also say that it's true that Diablo 4, from the boss mechanics to the skill tree, the progression system that we've seen at least, and the content variety, it all seems streamlined, dumbed down versions of existing ARPGs built for the mass market, because that's exactly what it is.
And it is true. It is streamlined and it's built for a broader audience. It's not built for this crazy in-depth sort of theory crafting. You have to build your character exactly the way the spreadsheet says, or it's completely unusable, that some other ARPGs have. I don't necessarily know that's a bad thing. I know that it will probably make it easier for you to get your friend to play if you don't have to give them a link to a website and 50 different build guides and a dozen YouTube videos to watch.
As what WoW was to EverQuest, what StarCraft was to Command & Conquer, what Overwatch was to TF2, what Hearthstone was to Magic the Gathering, what Heroes of the Storm was to Dota, and what their upcoming unnamed survival game is going to probably be to the survival genre. That is what Diablo 4 is to Grim Dawn and Last Epoch and Diablo 2 and Path of Exile. They're looking to take the things that work, add polish, refine gameplay, and make it more palatable for the masses. That's been Blizzard's MO for a long time, and I suspect it'll continue to be their MO.
And the reason it's their MO is because it works. They're making money hand over fist. People are buying their products. Whether you or I or anybody else dislike it, there's a reason that they do it. And there's a reason that it works. And when you ask somebody in these different genres what games they're playing, there's a reason they say they're playing a Blizzard style game or a Blizzard game
Going forward. And it's almost surprising that people seem surprised that this is the case. Now, there is room for there to strike a balance from what they have now for the streamlined, palatable version of an ARPG to the complexity and depth of a Path of Exile. And I do think...
And remember, Path of Exile is a 10-year-old game.
I think there is a fine line they're trying to balance, and they can push more into that complex direction. I really do. But no, they aren't looking to like compete with Path of Exile and games like it. They're looking to supersede it. Like
exactly what I just said earlier. There's market share and everything else. They're not looking to steal Path of Exile players. They might be looking to borrow some of the Path of Exile community, but they're wanting to reach outside of all of these communities and grow their company and grow their brand. And they're going to do it.
Like, I quite like PoE. I played a ton of the game when it first entered beta testing back in 2011. There's actually a Let's Play of the game still on the channel right now. Don't watch it. It's garbage content, but it is there. Like, I played this game from its inception when it was first playable. I thought it was really cool back then, and it's been amazing to see it grow and evolve over the years. PoE has really established itself as a solid...
How's Peach doing today? How's Unicorn doing today?
ARPG for fans of that genre. Like, people really like it, and it's been seeing continuous growth. At the same time, though, it's small. Like, very small in comparison to what Blizzard expects for numbers for its game.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to show it here, and I don't remember if it was another video or something we saw. But it was something like, I don't know, like 14,000 concurrent players or something like that. Like, I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but the numbers are dwarfed by even Diablo 4's beta's numbers. So while a game like Path of Exile might be an amazing game, it has carved out a niche, and that is where it will continue to live. And Blizzard wants to take Diablo 4 so much further than just the niche game.
All-time peak concurrent player count for Path of Exile is just shy of 160,000 players.
So the all-time peak was 160,000. All-time peak and current at the time of whatever this video was recorded was 12,000. And Diablo 4's numbers just eclipsed that without any sort of really try. It was a beta. How you doing, Chevs?
If Diablo 4 had 160,000 players, everyone would be calling it a dead game. They'd be like, wow, what a failure, Blizzard. Massive L. And
That's exactly true. If it released to 160,000 concurrent players, people would shit all over the game.
it's not, though, because PoE isn't a failure. 160,000 concurrent isn't a failure. It's nothing to...
Diablo 4 caused your GPU to overheat during the cutscenes. Did it fry it? I know I read that like 3080s, if you didn't download the latest GPU like game-ready drivers, there was a chance it could damage it for sure.
Scoff at. It's an impressive number for most games, but that's what I'm talking about. That is the sort of difference in expectations and audience size that we have between this more niche.
You have 4070 Ti. Was it okay? Did it just cut out? It didn't damage anything, did it?
Niche hardcore ARPG, and what a lot of...
It just throttled it down to 2D mode. Yeah, that sucks. They should have that fixed. They put out some game-ready drivers that were supposed to patch it during the beta. I almost guarantee it'll be fixed for the full release. I don't understand why these studios aren't capping max FPS on cutscenes and in menus. That seems to be what's killing a lot of these GPUs, is they just run into the multi-thousands on frames.
The criticisms are comparing it to and what Blizzard aims for that mass appeal. And my point here isn't that bigger game equals better game. I don't think that at all, but I do think it speaks to the general appeal.
Bigger game doesn't necessarily mean better game. Bigger game does mean more successful game, which means that it will get more money spent on it and it will get published more and there will be more room to add things to it. So yeah, if Blizzard's game, you know, does better and has enough backing behind it, they'll continue to support it. Your cutscenes were peaking at 4K FPS. Holy shit.
Appeal amongst a wider demographic that these...
What'd you think of the beta? Other than it frying your graphics hard.
Games have that this genre has or doesn't have or hasn't had. For everything that I think is cool and that ARPG fans love about PoE, many average gamers don't care, aren't interested in, or just actively dislike. But again, I do think a better balance can be struck from where we are right now. There are definitely lessons to be learned from these other ARPGs, and I hope Blizzard does offer more complexity and more variety in the end game from what we've seen up to this point.
You're a Diablo fan from day one. You want to buy it. What class did you enjoy the most during the beta? I think that Diablo will offer more complexity and everything else. We didn't get to play with the Paragon system. We didn't get a full set of skills. We didn't get all the legendaries. Diablo 3's builds have more depth than the Diablo 4 builds. Diablo 2 builds, I'm sure, have the same. We were only in the beginning stages of leveling. People need to just calm the fuck down and just wait. Hate that Diablo 3 got soft sorted, though. I understand that. I understand that there are people that don't like Diablo 3 that only like Diablo 2, and there are people that like Diablo 3 that don't like Diablo 2. It's interesting where the split is for people. You're a soloist, then you'll probably have a lot of fun. I'm hoping to play a lot of solo with Diablo 4, but definitely mix in with the community and help people out, especially with keys on higher level dungeons.
We've still yet to play around with the Paragon board or see those 2 highest tiers of loot drops, and hopefully these do make a...
Haven't played with the Paragon system, haven't seen the 2 highest tiers of loot drops, haven't unlocked all of our skills to fully modify things. There's so much stuff we didn't see.
Big difference. I mean, they should be playing a major role in build customization and variety. And I just love all of the in the weeds dissection and discussion that we've been seeing over the course of the past week, now that a lot of different experienced veteran players of this genre have gotten their hands on it. This is the stuff that's super interesting. And
yeah, I was going to say you haven't seen shit yet. I've been going through trying to do a lot of coverage of Diablo 4 on the YouTube channel. I've been going through trying to watch other people's videos, give reactions, hot takes, give my thoughts, really go through as much news as we can. I'm very hopeful for Diablo 4 and Diablo 4's endgame. I really feel like there's going to be a good spot for this game to nestle into. I can't wait to get the builds together where we can get more of the modified skills and not just the skills themselves. The modifier skills, not just skills themselves. I agree. I can't wait to really dive into messing with the different characters and classes and see what's there and how we can take them and push them, how we can make our own builds, or how we can take current best builds or what will be considered current best builds or meta builds, turn them into off meta builds and show that you can still do just as much with it. How far can we go in depth? I hope it's going to be far enough that there's definitely some room for what you can do, but I'm honestly... I don't know that I want it to be the level of Path of Exile. Even though I'm a content creator and that would provide me content, I think for a gamer it can be off-putting to have to go too far into it. There were so many pet damage yeah. That only 24 points was not enough to go into. Exactly. You're going to need the additional 30, 40 points that you have to really spec into it to figure out what you want to do.
And important to players like me, but I also remember my 18-year-old self not caring at all what the hardcore MMO players had to say about WoW prior to it coming out. And I do think there's a degree of that happening here as well, and just with games critique in general, there's so much like minutia we tend to really focus on that seems ultra important, but maybe in the grand scheme of things really isn't important, and that really accounts for a lot of what I talk about on this.
Isn't there like 69 skill points? Yeah, with like world tiers and stuff. Yeah, there's a bunch of extra ones all over the place. I don't know exactly how to get them, but that does sound about right. Shadow, thank you for the alert. I do think that the creator is talking about the right stuff here when he says his 18-year-old self didn't really give a shit. Like my 18-year-old self, I was having fun. I was playing with my friends. You know what I want to do? I just wanted to do better than them. And, you know, back when I was younger, there wasn't as much YouTube and stuff. It was a little bit harder to find information. But as a full-time gamer now, it's a little bit different. Back when I was working and doing stuff like that, like it was catching a 10-minute guide. All I want is like something that involves a 10, 15-minute YouTube video that I can watch while I'm taking a shit or while I'm waiting to come home from work or while I'm at the office. I can watch it and go, this sounds awesome. I want to go home and try this when I get home. And I could go home and look at the stuff and go, I have most of this stuff. I can put it together and try this build out and show it off to my friends and stuff like that. I don't want to have to go, oh, okay, well, I want to try this. Okay, so I have to grind for the next 3 weeks to get all of this stuff just to try this build to even see if I like it. And that's why I think this game will do a little bit better than some other ones. So that means we didn't even see, just skills. Yeah, there was literally just enough skill points in the beta to let you realistically get to your ultimate, and that was about it. Builds are going to be insane. I really do think so. Do I remember the game Lionheart? I don't think I ever played Lionheart.
Channel as well. Like a lot of the stuff that I fret over, that I get hyper fixated on, that I'm like, this is such a huge deal, to 95% of the player base of these games that I talk about, they're just like, whew. Not in that they don't get it or that they couldn't get it, but it doesn't matter. They sit down, they have fun. And I think we also have to remember.
And that's true. They sit down, they have fun. They want to know how to do something. They want to get in and they want to do it. They're not going to argue, oh my God, the font on Dodge here should have been bolder than what it is, or maybe had a better drop shadow, or the crit number's not big enough, or one of these hundreds of issues that professional gamers look at. Your average gamer's going to go, I don't care.
That there are these different portions of the audience and different types of players, because there's a huge difference between a person who considers themselves like a big ARPG fan, who plays Path of Exile, who plays Last Epoch, who plays all of these different games, who still plays Diablo 2 to this day in and day out, week after week. There's a huge difference between their expectations and their needs and the needs and expectations of most people, of a bulk of the potential purchasers and the people who are potentially going to be playing D4, with their needs, their desires, what they look for in the game, what they want out of a game. Massive, massive difference. That said, I do think the opinion of these seasoned and hardcore players is incredibly valuable, especially for the long-term health of the game, because
I think I think that listening to seasoned veteran players will help a game figure out anything that is detrimental or a massive shortfall. But I don't think that your content creators or your hardcore gamers with 50,000 hours are always going to offer up valuable information or criticisms for a game that are applicable towards 80% of your player base or 90% of your player base in some situations. And I think that is the pitfall that some companies have to watch out for, and most of them do. And it's easy as a content creator to sort of start to get full of ourselves and go, well, we play these games more than your average player, so we really see a lot of these issues that your average player will see at some point in the future, which is true. But how many of your average players are going to get to that amount of hours to see those issues, to see those problems, to see those pitfalls, and how many of them are realistically going to care? So I put stock in hardcore gamers and what they say, and I like to listen to their views and opinions, but I also like to be a realist and a practical, and be practical and weigh them against just common sense and common expectations. And I think some people tend to throw that out the window. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded.
These are the ones with thousands of hours sunk into their particular game or genre of choice, and they know the ins and outs and the mechanisms and mechanics that keep them.
So I'm going to talk about something really quick, right? Just real quick. Let me pull up a calculator. Where's my calculator? So we're going to take 1,000 hours, and we're going to divide that by 52 weeks. That's 20 hours a week, okay? Without taking a single week off for a year, okay? That's 1,000 hours. And then we'll divide that by 7. That's 3 hours a day. Your average gamer is not playing 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So the person with 1,000 or 2,000 hours in your game in a year, okay, they don't speak to your average Andy. Your average Andy is going to play probably 1.5 hours a night after work, maybe 2 hours a night, maybe 3 days a week. They might get to play 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday, right? So let's just say they're doing an hour and a half, 3 days a week. That's 4.5 hours, right? So that's 4.5 hours. And then they're going to do an additional 4 hours between Saturday and Sunday. And then we're going to multiply that by 52. Yeah, that is less than 500 hours in a year if they play that exact same regimented amount every week. Nothing happens with real life. They don't get in a fight with their wife. They don't get in a fight with their husband about how many hours they're playing. Nothing comes up. They don't take vacations. The issues that your average gamer are going to see in 500 hours and then it stopped playing, yeah. So let's divide this into quarters, right? So for quarters, that's 110 hours a quarter or 110 hours a season. Your average gamer is going to play 110 hours in a season. I'm going to play 110 hours in the first 2 weeks. My experience is not the same as your average gamer. And that is what people need to remember when they talk about content creators having all these valuable opinions. Your average gamer's experience is not on par with the person that you're saying is criticism we need to listen to. It's not to say they don't offer valuable criticism or see glaring issues when they pop up ahead of time, but their experience is not the same as your average gamer. Do you know what I mean? Never really thought about it. Games with thousands of hours that already have 170 hours. And the average game is I would say your average gamer is probably larger than 50%. I would say your average gamer is probably 80% of your audience, and that 80% shows up probably the first 4 weeks out of every season to try out the new content and get through it, and then they drop off for the last 2 weeks or the last 2 months of the season, and then the only people that are really hanging out are your hardcore gamers or your people that are taking it a little bit slower. That's going to be about what you have. And most statistics and charts show a large influx of players at the beginning, and then they taper off throughout the seasons. And that is what Blizzard is going to target, is those people, and making sure that big group come back every season. They buy the new seasonal stuff, and they're going to try to retain and grow that over time. And that's who your audience is. So those are the people that everything's going to be targeted at. And listening to somebody with 12,000 hours in one character is not going to help those type of people.
Them coming back after all this time, and if they're not seeing it in D4,
because your average gamer will never hit 12,000 hours in their lifetime.
They're gonna call it out, and justifiably so, because without these things, D4 might just be a game that they play for a little while and then go back to their core game. And maybe that's okay, but ultimately, a lot of these people, I get the sense, and me, when I critique games, I'm looking to improve it to fit my needs of long-term and my desire to continue playing a game and keep coming back to a game.
All right, so I don't know this guy, right? I don't know this guy. But his desire for a game and to keep coming back and to keep playing the game is different than your average gamer, because this guy is a content creator and he needs more stuff there to come back to keep him going to create content. It's nothing against him. It's nothing against me. I need content to create. He needs content to create. Our needs are different than your average gamer. And as long as we recognize that, that's fine. And know that game companies realize that we don't pay all of their bills. It's the 80% of the people that show up 4, 8, 12, 24, 240 weeks or 240 days out of the year or whatever. Those are the people that pay the bills. You have one game that has 74,000 hours in it. That's insane.
Even if that isn't what everyone is looking for. And the best thing I think Blizzard can do, or any games company can do, is try to find that balance between those different audiences with their different needs.
And they will. They'll make sure that 90% of the content applies to 80% of the player base, and the last 10% of the content applies to the 1%ers. Or probably even less than that. It'll probably be the last 5% of the content applies to the last 1%ers, and it'll keep their game viable.
And what they look for.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, the last 20% could never show up, and the game's still going to be it's going to be so successful that it's not going to matter. But if you tailor all content to the last 20%, the top 20% of your players, then the bottom 80% will never show up, and now you've got a failed game.
And if you do consider yourself one of those more hardcore players, or someone who's more interested in that kind of discussion, absolutely watch all of this content. Watch all of those different creators that I talked about. It's really, really good stuff. I do plan to do a video diving into my overall thoughts and critiques, but I'm probably going to wait until after this upcoming weekend's beta. With all that said, you know, bottom line for me is, yeah, Diablo 4 is a ton of fun to play, and I suspect I will be spending a lot of time with it. A lot of these criticisms are very valid, but they still won't matter likely to 95% of the player base who doesn't plan to spend hundreds or thousands of hours. It will matter to
Exactly. That's literally the numbers we just went over. Most of these criticisms aren't going to matter to a lot of the player base.
To those people, though, who are planning.
That's got to be an easy 4+ years of solid time. That's a lot of time.
Planning to sink 1,000 hours, and I do hope that these critiques are taken seriously for that portion of the player base, because these are the ones that will stick around long term, funding the live service model that Blizzard's going.
They're not going to fund the live. No. They're not going to fund the live service model. I know it's fun to think that they're going to fund the live service model. They're not going to fund the live service model. You know who's going to fund the live service model? The people that show up and buy all the cosmetics and buy everything up front and pay for everything in the first couple weeks of the season. Those are going to be the people that make the game viable for the whole season. How you doing, Dalton?
Going all in.
I know it's nice to think that the people that hang out for the rest of the season are going to be the ones that, like, keep the game viable, and they're not. All the money will be made in the first couple weeks of every season. Game's mad fun. No, dude, I really like Diablo 4. I thought they did awesome. How was your time with Diablo 4, Dalton?
On. And I do think there's a good chance that I will be one of those players, especially if the end game proves to provide enough variety and content. I've enjoyed the base of what I've played so far and have every intention to keep playing going forward if they can provide those hooks and provide that replayability. I do want to talk about and cover Diablo 4 a lot more than I even have at this point, but I don't want to flood this channel with daily updates, news, or guides even for one game. I've just been enjoying the variety of style and content and games that we cover, and I want to keep going down that path. So that said, we're starting a second channel. That's the plan right now. This will be entirely focused on Diablo 4. We'll probably be producing guides, news, and updates. It's just going to be full-on Diablo 4 coverage. And the goal of which, sort of like what I do with this channel, is to try to make stuff that is hopefully useful and helpful and interesting for everyone to watch, but just about one game instead of the variety that we do here. And I say we because my pal Liam is going to be making videos with me as well. We've known each other for a while. He's actually been editing on this channel for about a year or so now, maybe a little longer. And we've been working together on different projects, and we're...
So it sounds like that's going to be pretty much the end of this video. There's going to be some more stuff about this guy's second channel, and then it looked like another Ridge Wallet ad or something towards the end. But hopefully you guys enjoyed my thoughts and my critiques and my opinions on some of the criticism. I don't know that everyone hates Diablo 4. I think that there's a vocal minority that likes to speak up about things and is, while maybe right to be concerned about some possible issues, I do think are maybe, I don't want to say fear-mongering, but definitely trying to make videos to get attention and views and clickbait, and trying to compare a game that's not out against games that are 10 years old and draw direct comparisons. And I don't always know that that's fair, especially when we haven't seen the full game in its entirety, which of Diablo 4, and we haven't seen sort of a blueprint or a first year's layout for what they plan on doing. And we haven't really got to vet the content to see where the shortcomings are. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this deep dive into Everyone Hates Diablo 4, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to be what you guys think. So let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my takes during this video. And until next time, have a great day.